Hey everybody, welcome to this Caregiver Coffee. My name is Matthew Estrad. I'm a gerontologist in St. Tammany Parish, and I've been partnering with the Council on Aging in St. Tammany for over 10 years, all of that time as the Caregiver Support Group Facilitator each week, and also as a trainer for their staff, a consultant in other roles at other times. Um, Today, we're going to be talking about interacting with emergency services personnel when you are a caregiver of someone who is living with dementia. So we'll go over these tips because, of course, whenever emergency services is involved, it could be pretty stressful for you and your loved one and for the emergency personnel. So we're going to go through some tips that I hope that you will consider if either before any kind of emergency situation, I can't talk, emergency situation or event, and also during, and we may even do some things after there's a situation. So before we get to this really important topic, just want to give you my spiel, my commercial about the caregiver support group that we have every week. So we meet together. I with caregivers who stop by. We meet every Tuesday of the month, basically, from 6 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. Sometimes we're in person, and sometimes we are virtual. But we're not. We don't do both at the same time. Where it's not a hybrid model. So the basics of how the month looks like is that the first Tuesday of the month, we are in person, 6 p.m., always the same time. We're at the Slidell Senior Activity Center, and then we go till 7:30. And then on the second Tuesday of the month, we are in person. I'm sorry. We are on Zoom. We're on the Zoom virtual platform, much like I am right now, recording on Zoom. You can join us using your computer, like I'm on a computer with a camera. You can use the Zoom app on your smartphone. You can use the Zoom app on your tablet. You can even just call in from a smartphone or from a landline phone, and you treat it as an audio conference call. Basically, you won't see us, we won't see you, but you'll be able to interact with us. The third Tuesday of the month, we're back in person. This time we're in Covington at the Covington Senior Activity Center from 6 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. And then the fourth Tuesday of the month, and sometimes we will meet if there's a fifth Tuesday, you just have to read the calendar. So that last Tuesday of the month, we are back on the Zoom platform. And all this information can be found on a flyer that we publish every 2 months. We refresh it every 2 months with the new dates. So if you want to know exactly where we are, if you want to see how to join us either by phone or by clicking on the Zoom link, you can do that by making sure that we have your one way is you know that we have you on our private email list. So if you get the flyer, you can click on a link and you can add your email to a private list. And every Tuesday in the morning, I will send out a reminder and let you know where we are. You can always download the flyer from there. Otherwise, you can find it on the Coast website. It's coastseniors.org. You navigate to caregiver services, and then where you see my picture, you'll have a couple of clicks. You'll see my picture, and then you can click on the PDF, and we always try to keep that updated with the most recent 2 months so that you can put that on your refrigerator or put the information in your planner, and you'll know where we are, how to reach us, etc. So hope that you will do that. Right now, the November, December 2025 is up, and then we'll just, as we get towards the end of this month, we refresh it. So hope you'll join us, and I hope that you'll share. A couple of things, we keep everybody's information private. We ask everybody just not to ever share any details, names, and things like that outside of the group, but certainly we want you to share information that there is a group and that we're always welcoming new members. And in the lessons, of course, that you learn in the group, please do share those. You never have to make a reservation. You can just stop by. You don't have to tell us that you're not able to come. And some people come every week, some once a month, sometimes some people are once a quarter, or just, when things get challenging for them, they'll come back. Otherwise, they're they're not attending, which is fine. So we have a fairly large email group that receives it, and we only get a handful of those people that join us. So I hope that you are one of those that will join the list and eventually join us in person if you're not already. So, all right, with that out of the way, thank you for listening to all of that. We'll get into this important topic on interacting with emergency services personnel. All right, so the perspective where I'm coming from on this topic is that I was blessed to be able to provide dementia training to dozens of emergency personnel in St. Tammany Parish about 3 years ago, like 2003, 2004. So that was some state troopers, that was sheriff's deputies, that was EMS, mostly sheriff's deputies in all different departments, from dispatch to being out on the field and having an area that they were responsible for. And so one thing that I definitely learned is that they care. They recognize that dementia is a problem, and they're going to do everything that they can to keep the person living with dementia safe, to keep the caregiver safe, and really assess the situation, not jump to conclusions. So I was really impressed by the men and women who were in the classes, and I learned as much as they learned. I mean, I may have learned more, hearing from their experiences, interaction with families that are experiencing this than they learned from me. But they certainly did enjoy it, and they really soaked up the lessons. So I have some notes. I'm gonna just to kind of make sure I stay on track. So this is important to be prepared for emergencies and to know what to do when an emergency is happening. We know that this is usually a stressful time. The police have shown up or the EMS have shown up, and it's not because there are great things going on, there's a party going on or anything like that. It's something's usually gone wrong. Someone might be hurt, there might be a medical situation, there might have been a wandering, or it's really called an elopement event where someone with dementia leaves their house and we can't find them. So they want to be able to work with the caregivers and the persons living with dementia, and knowing what I talked with them about, and then knowing some of the things in this video, I think will be helpful for just for both sides all cooperating. The first recommendation is that if you're a caregiver of someone who's living with dementia or even has another sort of disability, could be a physical disability, not a cognitive disability, is that you call the police department. You say, "Hey, I live at this address, and I would just love for you to put in the dispatch notes, or yeah, in the dispatch notes that I am a caregiver of someone who's living with dementia here at this address." And so that's going to do a few things. That's going to so that if ever you need to call 911 and they start sending police or EMS to your address, they're they're hearing this information. They're hearing the notes read to them while they're on their way to your address. So you want them to have as much information as possible, and knowing that someone has a probable dementia, or you could say Alzheimer's, even though it may or may not be Alzheimer's, you can say there's a cognitive impairment or there's dementia involved, so that the police officers and other personnel that approach that know that, hey, I might be interacting with someone who might be confused, who might be scared, who may not be able to communicate, who may be having confabulations or making up things that seem real to them. They may not be true. Um, and so I mentioned call the police, but you also may want to call the state troopers. You may want to call any Homeland Security, if there's a database for Homeland Security in your community. So St. Tammany Parish has that. Might want to call EMS, because I'll be honest, I don't know if the police database is talking to the EMS database and state troopers, and I think it depends on the jurisdiction and the area where you live, not just talking about St. Tammany, but if you're watching this and you live in another state, it's going to differ based on different MOU, memorandums of understanding and contracts and stuff like that. Who has what database? If it's one for all the agencies, which would be wonderful, obviously, so they are looking at the same information, or if they're somewhat separate or siloed, hopefully not. So then they can you would just have to make more phone calls to assess that. So, all right. So you want to have that information. Another good tip is to have information ready. So have a piece of paper or papers, and they're going to have things like medical information. So diagnoses, it might stay on there like has dementia and has a heart condition, um, medications, doctor contacts, mobility needs, etc., emergency contacts. Um, so why do you want to have that? Because this might be stuff that you have stored in your head, right? Well, in an emergency, we all get flustered. I'll just say most of us get flustered. And what you want to have is something that you can read off of in case you're nervous and there's just you're you're scattered like I would be. Um, in an emergency, and you want to be able to read the information or even just give the information to somebody. You want to note behavioral triggers if there's certain triggers that might upset someone. If there are common behaviors such as delusions or accusations and blaming and paranoia, like they stole this from me. It might the sheet might say my loved one sometimes has delusions that people are stealing from them. Whatever information you can give to them would make it easier. I mean, otherwise, of course, you can tell them and read it to them once on scene, but being able to hand somebody a piece of paper might be very useful as well. In the event that you need to call, stay calm, read the things that are on your sheet. Maybe you have a script of what you're going to say, of the basics of what you're going to say, so that you're calm and you're reading it like you have your address. So you don't even have to think about your address. Um, when they do arrive, and something you might even want to say tell 911 is when you do arrive, if you could turn off the lights and the sirens and stuff. Of course, they're going to have them on en route, but maybe when they get there, because this person's living with dementia, this is going to scare them. Maybe they're able to do that. It's a reasonable request. Can they do that? Not sure. But you'll just, it's something you can certainly request. Um, being calm once they get there, if you're able to address the emergency personnel by talking with them or handing them a piece of paper before they approach your loved one who's living with dementia, so then they're able to read it and kind of approach them, uh, it would be that's ideal. Another thought is if the person has eloped. So let's say you call the police because you can't find your loved one, you feel like they took the vehicle that they normally don't or not they don't drive or have the keys to. They found the keys, they drove away, you don't know where they are, you're not able to track them, or maybe you are able to track them. Know how you're going to explain that to the police as far as like this is what they were wearing. Earlier this morning they mentioned, really wanting all day they've said that they need to get to Walmart um, because they need certain groceries. Well, that's important information for the police because that might mean, okay, well, they could be at the grocery store. If that was kind of like, ruminating all day, that's possibly where they went. So that's where we're going to go is a neighborhood Walmart or, Quista Pace or, wherever the place happens to be, whatever makes sense. So I use the word wandering and elopement. So wander, and in the grand scheme of things, this is we can all use the word wander, especially in an emergency, but there is a difference. So wander would be that someone is walking aimlessly without any kind of purpose. Most of the time, we believe, a person living with dementia elopes, meaning they went to a certain place, whether it exists or not, and they were on a mission. They wanted to get groceries, or they were going to their job, which they no longer have, because they're retired, but in their mind, they needed to leave immediately because they were going to be late for work, or they're a teacher and the kids will be waiting in the classroom if they don't get to school on time. So that's an elopement. And like I said, in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't really matter in that moment in the emergency, but it is important to know that and to tell the police, they did go, they probably went somewhere with a purpose, and this is likely where they're going to be. Another thing could be that they might have left on a purpose, but it sort of turns to wandering. Let's say that they left the house with a purpose in a vehicle, and they were going, but then they didn't take the interstate exit, or they didn't take the turn they needed to, and they just keep going and going, and in their mind they're thinking, it's going to be here soon, or they lose track of time. Well, they can sort of turn into wandering where they think they know where they're going, but they're not, and now they don't know how to get back to where they were after they realize that they are lost. So, as you can see, it gets very stressful for everybody. So, the more information that you can give the police, the more information you have, like on a piece of paper, the better. And I think I mentioned, but I'll mention it again, like being able to describe what the person was wearing before they left the house, if that's what happens. So, and then hopefully, if someone did elope or wander, they could still wander. Um, they are found quickly, and then after that, then figure out, okay, how do we avoid this from happening again? It doesn't necessarily mean placement in an assisted living or memory care community. I mean, it could, but it doesn't necessarily mean that. It certainly means that that person's at a greater risk, because if they do it once, there's a risk that they could do it again. So then, what kind of conversation do you have with law enforcement as far as mitigating this from happening again? So it's all worth discussing and figuring out what can we do better, um, so we can avoid it, and stay as safe as possible in the beginning, because we dementia, when someone's living with dementia, it's a balance of freedom and risk. And certainly, on one hand, you could not let someone out of the house, which I wouldn't recommend. That's not kind, and that's not charitable, and that's not humane to say, okay, you're not leaving the house and we're locking the house, and you know all that. The other is to do nothing, and that's not fair to anyone as well. So it's a balance of these things, whether it's different locks, different protocols in the house, sensors in the house, so you know when the doors are opening. Or it could also mean that, hey, it makes sense to look at assisted living where the person will be able to walk around and explore and whatnot in a safer environment. So thanks for listening all the way to this video. I hope that you'll consider watching other videos and sharing the videos. I hope that you'll consider joining our support group if you're in the area, and telling people about that as well. So thanks again for being here with me, and I wish you well until you see me on your screen again. Bye for now.